I'm Sally Hassell. I'm the Public Affairs and Policy Manager for Planned Parenthood, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota. And Barty and Bonnie asked me to kind of talk a little bit about how elections sort of affect the conversations we have at the Capitol every year. Let there be no misunderstanding that elections matter. I think the best example that I can give was that prior to the 2006 elections in Minnesota, for the pro-choice community, we were not in a good place at the legislature. You may remember we were dealing pretty much with a defensive position at the legislature. We were battling anti-choice bills and all kinds of just really nasty legislation. We were constantly on the defense. In 2006, the elections were enormous. I mean, it was a completely different world for us because we were actually able to pick up, depending on who you ask, 5 or 6 pro-choice seats in the Senate and 19 pro-choice seats in the House. So we now have a solid majority in both bodies as far as a pro-choice majority is concerned. This is really great for us for a number of reasons. Of course, now we have a pro-choice Speaker of the House and we have a pro-choice Majority Leader. One of the major jobs of the Majority Leader and the Speaker of the House are to assign committee chairs. Committee chairs decide who gets to hear what bills are going to be heard. So prior to the 2006 elections, we kept trying to introduce all these great prevention-based bills. They were, funding for family planning. They were, comprehensive sex education, emergency contraception in the emergency room, all of these very prevention-based bills, and we couldn't even get a hearing because we were dealing with anti-choice chairs of these committees. After the elections, we now have pro-choice chairs, and our bills are getting heard like no one's business. We couldn't believe it. We're like, oh my gosh, this stuff is actually moving. We have a chance to really do some really great prevention work. And it was a huge, huge victory for us. And I'm not going to mince words when I say it was really nice to see our competition squirm a little bit because now they couldn't get a hearing on their bills. And that was a nice feeling after a good 12 years of being on the defense. So the elections, I like to think of them as one part of what Planned Parenthood really thinks of all of this as a cycle of advocacy. Everything we do, kind of works together. There are 3 major components to that. The first is base building, and that's, talking to the people who support your organization and getting out there in the community and going to community events and all kinds of things and just talking about your organization and what you do and what you care about. And it's about building your base of support. So then when the legislative session starts, like Carla was mentioning, when it comes time to get the calls in to your legislator, your representative, your senator, the governor, whomever, you call on your base to do that. That's your base of support. You want them making those phone calls and sending the letters and showing up for lobby day. And you want to bring those people in and make them feel like they're part of the process. And they can, of course, affect change that way. We all know that those letters and phone calls and visits work. We know they do. The third part of that is the elections, though. And the elections are a critical point because that's our opportunity to hold them accountable for what they've done during the legislative session. I don't like to use the word threaten. A lot of people think that that's what goes on, that a lobbyist will go into, Senator X's office and say, if you don't vote this way, we're going to get you out of office. Or, hey, we helped get you elected. You have to go with us on this. That's not what we do. We don't threaten that way. What we do is say, you know what, there are 300,000 pro-choice voters in this state. That is a block that you need to be responsive to. It isn't just about being responsive to Planned Parenthood's agenda. It's about being responsive to the women of Minnesota and their health care. So all of that is a cycle of advocacy. I know there are some organizations that also, during the legislative session, some of their conversations, again, some people would say this is threatening or intimidating, but quite honestly, I think it's a really helpful tool. One of the things that we can do is we can say, I know this is coming up on the floor, I know this amendment is going to happen, we know that in advance. We're talking to legislators and saying, just so you know, we will be scoring your votes. Because then when it comes time for the elections, we're going to put out a nonpartisan voter guide that scores every legislator's vote on every issue that's important to us. And that way, our supporters are going to get that voter guide and they're going to be able to make an informed decision. Because even though you don't have to be here constantly to know what's going on, there are a lot of votes that happen that no one even ever hears about. And so you have to go to the organizations that you trust to find out what those votes were and what really happened. I mean, when Senator X says that they're, a very pro-choice senator, but, was conspicuously absent for all of the necessary votes on the floor, that matters. That absolutely matters. It's one thing to say you're an advocate. It's another to actually, take the vote.